Secretary Arne Duncan, it's great to be here with you.
Thank you.
We were just talking about his long legs and how they're going to reach the front of this platform. I'm delighted to be here, and I want to just start with something that you unveiled just yesterday, a proposal to redirect the money that's being spent today to incarcerate half the people who are convicted of nonviolent crimes and put it instead into paying teachers who are working in the highest need schools in the toughest communities. You said you want to tackle, you call it the school to prison pipeline, and we've heard you talk about this before, but how would this work?
So I think no one can defend the current status quo. No one can say that mass incarceration has worked, has made us safer, has worked economically. And if we took, as you said, if we just took 50% of nonviolent offenders, instead of locking them up at $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, found other paths for them, if we took the 20% of schools around the nation in the poorest communities with the highest poverty rates, we could take every teacher in those schools and give them a 50% raise. And we should pay all teachers more. This, for me, is a starting point. But great teachers make a huge difference in students' lives. There's all kinds of data, not just the academic learning, but great teachers lead to less teenage pregnancy, lead to more college-going rates. And if we actually want to stop locking folks up, if we could attract and retain great teachers in our poorest communities, that would be life-transforming. And we can't talk about this without talking about race and class. The disproportionate number of men of color who are locked up, who don't have educational opportunity. If we want to have strong families and strong communities, we have to give them a chance at the front end, and that's what this is about.
So what would you do differently in the way you treat young nonviolent offenders? Where would you give them a break? What would you do differently?
Well, again, I think there's all kinds of paths to help them other than locking them up for, again, $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 per person. And you have to give them second chances, you have to give them drug treatment, you got to give them training programs. But at the end of the day, the vast majority end up going back to jail. We're not helping to prevent more crimes. And the cost to society is staggering. It's hard to go back to taxpayers for more resources these days. But if you could take $15 billion and stop spending it on penitentiaries and prisons and spend that on great teachers and create an incentive structure to have those great teachers work in our most challenging communities, again, it would change everything. It would change everything. Well, I want to make teaching in tough communities the pinnacle of an educator's career rather than something to escape or to avoid altogether.
Well, let's bore down for just a second. I mean, you're saying just paying teachers more is going to make the difference in the lives of these young people. I mean, make that connection for us. Great
teachers, all kinds of research, great teachers not only add months of additional learning every single year for students. One great teacher, Raj Chetty's work out of Harvard University, longitudinal studies, one great teacher increases the lifetime earnings of a class of students by more than $250,000. One great teacher reduces teenage pregnancy. One great teacher increases college-going rates. And far too often in our nation, the children in the communities who need the best get the least. And I want to reverse that. I want to make sure the children in communities who need the best educators get the best. And if we do that, their life trajectory will be radically different, and long-term, we'll be locking up many fewer young people, and very specifically, young men of color.
But just quickly, you would have to couple this, wouldn't you have to couple this with other reforms as well, outside education?
Oh yes, there's a million other things we have to do to reduce poverty and increase health care and housing and work in integration, but I want to make a massive play. Great teachers transform young people's lives. And today in our nation, we have very few incentives and lots of disincentives for the hardest working, the most committed teachers and principals to work in our most underserved communities, be that inner city urban or rural or remote or Native American reservations. I want to challenge that status quo full on. I want to flip that on its head and do everything we can to attract and retain great talent in the communities where we need it the most.
Let's talk about another innovation, Secretary Duncan. This one that you've been talking about, this one's in higher ed. This is the idea of giving young people what you call micro-credentials. What do you mean by that? How would that work?
Well, historically in higher education, what's been fixed was time and location. You went to a lecture hall like this at 10:30 on a Tuesday and sat and listened. And that needs to become variable, not fixed. And young people, folks returning to the world of work, single moms trying to climb the economic ladder, need to be able to learn anything they want, anytime, anywhere. So having the chance to earn credentials in a portable way, have them stackable over time. We all need to be lifelong learners. This idea of sitting in a class for 9 months to learn this just doesn't fit the reality of what our students are looking for today. The average college student today is non-traditional. They're older, they're working, they may have kids, and the traditional is becoming the not traditional. And we have some folks in the higher ed space moving very, very rapidly to meet that need of both folks who want to learn and also employers who are looking for folks with more skills. But we're doing a lot to try and accelerate that pace of change through what we call experimental sites and investing in places that are moving to shorter-term credentials and helping folks climb that academic ladder more rapidly.
Give us an example. What's a specific example of what a micro-credential would be?
So if you can learn to code in 3 months or 5 months or 6 months and go from basically not having a job to making $50,000, $60,000 a year, we should be able to incentivize folks to offer those kinds of opportunities.
And how is that different from what we used to call vocational ed? And it's different from, you know, the idea of getting it's clearly different from the idea of getting a 4-year college
So we need
education.
to, again, whether it's technology or advanced manufacturing or green energy, there's a whole set of new jobs and fields emerging where short-term training can lead to real dividends. And I worry a lot about the lack of economic mobility, the lack of opportunity for folks to, you know, retrain and retool and get jobs for the new economy. And if we can be much more nimble in whether it's a 3-month program or 6-month program, historically we fund, you know, year-long programs or 4-year degrees or whatever, and that still has a very, very important place. But we just have to be much more entrepreneurial, much more innovative, much more flexible, and our resources drive a lot of this. So if we can get more resources to places that are thinking differently and can help people more quickly get on their feet and get a higher paying job, we need to incentivize that rather than have our money be stifle that innovation.
Now, we know the administration had set a really ambitious goal of raising the post-secondary degree attainment rate to 60%. That's still a long way off. I guess my question is this partly an acknowledgement that this was a whole lot harder to do than you expected going in?
They were related, but it's actually not quite the case. This is just a reality of we have a new economy. And today's learners look very different than the learners from 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. And yes, we do need to lead the world in college completion rates. We did one generation ago. 11 other countries have passed us by. We're now 12th. That's not a badge of honor.
What is the rate right now of college?
40-ish, and we have to go from 40-ish to 60. So we have a long way to go. And in a globally competitive economy, high-wage, high-skilled jobs are going to go to the nations with the most educated workforce. And I want that to be the United States and not other countries. And so we have to continue to innovate. We have to continue to get better faster than we are. We're very pleased that high school graduation rates are at all-time highs. Dropout rates are down significantly. We hope over time that translates to higher completion rates. But again, other countries are moving faster than us, so I feel a real sense of urgency here.
Secretary Duncan, you've also spent a good deal of your time focused on the college debt crisis in this country, the higher ed debt. You've talked about a number of ways to deal with that. One of them has to do with creating income-based loan repayment plans. This is now getting a lot of political pushback. Explain what you would like to do in that arena. How does it work, income-based repayment?
Well, I will come to that, but it's sort of a bigger issue. So first, going to college is the best investment long-term that anyone can make in their future and in their family's future. So that part is true. It is also true that for too many young people, college costs too much. It's also true that some folks are starting to think college is just for wealthy people, not for people like them. And that's a real concern to me. That's a real worry. So we have to take this on in a number of different ways. There's not one answer. One is we want to make community colleges free. That's America's College Promise plan. And that's not the President's plan or Arne Duncan's plan or a Democratic plan. That comes from Governor Haslam, who is a Republican governor in Tennessee, who has opened up community colleges to his state. And it's very early, but just extraordinary interest. And Judy, the recognition there is that today a high school diploma is important, but is insufficient for getting a good paying job. And we actually want to make pre-K, because early childhood is so hugely important, pre-K through 14 the norm. K to 12 served us pretty well for the past century. It is insufficient going forward. So if we could make community college free, that would do a huge amount to reduce debt. Secondly, the worst debt is debt you get when you don't get a degree. And we have to do so much more to challenge universities. Yes, access is important. We've done a huge amount to increase access and huge increases in Pell Grants. But we have to make sure it's not about just access, it's about completion. And some universities take that mission very seriously. Some do a great job with Pell Grant recipients and English language learners and first generation. Others don't do. And the worst situation is getting that debt without having a diploma. Income-based repayment simply says that we will index your repayments to your income. So if you work in a legal aid clinic or you're a social worker or a teacher, you'll pay less than if you're an investment banker. We just think it's the right thing to do. There's been significant uptake in that. There are more people, like 5,000 folks every day are signing up. It's not the right option for everybody, but how we help people manage their debt at the back end is something we have to continue to get better at.
And what about the criticism that we're hearing from a number of folks in the Congress and elsewhere, that what this does, though, in part, is it gives colleges the opportunity, once again, to raise tuition?
So what we've also tried to do, so there's many legs to this stool. So we need to continue to invest. The other thing we've tried to do is provide maximum transparency to young people around not just one-year costs, but four-year costs and graduation rates. We put out recently the college scorecard that's had 5 million views just in the past couple weeks. And historically, this has been very, very opaque. It's been hard to navigate. So the more we can empower young people and their families to make good choices, that's going to force the marketplace to adjust and change. And so we need to play. We need to better empower young people and families to make good choices. Universities have to do a better job of containing costs. And while there are examples of that, I've talked to a number of college presidents recently who have not just kept tuition flat, some are cutting tuition 20, 30, 40% because they're mission driven. So they're very interesting exceptions to that rule. And then finally, we have to challenge states to reinvest in higher education, because when states walk away from their investment, universities jack the tuition up. So there are at least 4 legs to this stool, and we have to hold ourselves mutually accountable to making college more accessible, more affordable, and focus on success, completion, not just access.
You are, in many ways, a hot topic in the media. There's probably more profiles done of you than any other cabinet secretary I've been looking at.
I don't think that's true.
All right, well, I won't ask you who's competing with you. But some of the recent profiles that have been out there point out that the manner in which the Obama administration K-12 reforms were carried out, in part incentivizing states to adopt changes that did not already have broad popular support on the ground. For example, tying teacher evaluations to test scores, has led to a lot of political pushback. And the question that's now out there is so the reforms are being delayed, some of them are even being challenged in court. How concerned are you that the legacy, and not just the legacy, but what you've spent so much time working on, is now at risk?
I don't want to blow through it. I'm actually much less concerned than maybe you or some of the others. It's so interesting. The media loves to focus on conflict, and I understand that might sell. What the media doesn't focus on is collaboration. If you sort of step back and look, what you've seen is north of 40 states raise standards, Republican and Democrat across the board, because historically, many states dummied down standards K-12 to make politicians look good and told kids they were ready to go on to college when they weren't even close. And they had to take huge amounts of remedial classes. So we've been lying to kids and families for decades. That is starting to stop. Many states are starting to think about ways to reward and incentivize and spotlight great teachers. And test scores can be a small part of this. Test scores tell you some things, they don't tell you others. I'm actually not that concerned there. But we want to highlight great teachers. Great teachers transform young people's lives. We need to reward that. We need to incentivize that. We need to pay them more. We need to give them more leadership opportunities. And anyone who wants to treat all teachers as the same, I think, devalues the extraordinary work they do, and frankly demeans the profession. And so what you have is states around the country who are thinking differently about teacher and principal evaluation support, who are raising standards, who are turning around underperforming schools. This is another hugely underreported story, that part of the reason the graduation rate is up and dropout rates are down is we've invested $5 billion to turn around the lowest performing schools in the nation. Folks said that couldn't happen. It hasn't been perfect, but many schools are getting better. And so this work is hard. It is very significant change. It's being done imperfectly. Implementation is difficult, but the nation is moving in a very different direction that short term will be rocky and bumpy, but long term puts us in a very different spot. If I take one more second on it, Massachusetts, virtually every measure, is our highest performing state, K-12. In Massachusetts, about 30% of their high school graduates, not their dropouts, 30% of their high school graduates have to take remedial classes in college. And when that happens, no one wins. Students lose, they drop out faster, costs families more money, costs all of us as taxpayers more money because we're paying for non-credit bearing classes, and that's our highest performing state. So you start there, think about states 2 through 50. And so the goal is to increase graduation rates, to reduce dropout rates, but to make sure our high school graduates are truly prepared for college and careers. And the simple measuring stick there is they don't have to take remedial classes.
But it's not clearly not all unfolding the way you had originally envisioned. I mean, states are doing it, as you said, in different ways. I think
it's actually very much how we envisioned. Our honest hope when we started was to get maybe half the nation moving in this direction. And the fact that we have 40, 45, 46 states moving this direction actually wildly exceeds what we anticipated a couple years ago. Now again, different states are doing this with different levels. The implementation is the really hard part. There are different levels of success. Some are doing it better than others. We need to do a better job of partnering and helping. But this change is very, very difficult and will be difficult for the next year or two or three. Will be rocky. But I think long term, these are all long, 10, 20-year plays. Massachusetts, with great controversy, raised their standards in the 90s. And what you saw over time was them rise to the top nationally. What we're trying to do is move the nation to the point that Massachusetts was, a couple decades ago.
Well, this political pushback, and just quickly, this is the last question, it can also be seen in this effort to rewrite No Child Left Behind. You've got a lot of legislators, not all of them Republican, who not only they'd like to see federal testing requirements completely taken out. Right now, the proposals that are before Congress would take out those federal requirements on what to do about low-performing schools. I guess my question is can you repair these political relationships enough to keep the elements that you and the president think are most crucial to keep?
So I think the political relationships are in much better shape than maybe what folks understand. We are actually proposing, just specifically on that, we're actually proposing a cap on testing in what we'd like to see in the rewrite of No Child Left Behind. We think there are many places that are testing too much and redundant and duplicative tests. We think annual assessments have a place, but just a place. It's not the be-all and end-all. The real challenge is we've had a dysfunctional Congress, and the law on No Child Left Behind has been broken for years. Unfortunately, Congress has been broken for years. We've partnered with states to provide waivers from the most onerous parts of the law. Again, partnered across the political spectrum, 42, 43 states, very underreported by the media because we're collaborating and working together. We hope Congress fixes a broken law. It is way overdue. I'm very concerned with Speaker Boehner stepping down that the odds of it being fixed went down, not up. And that's concerning for me because the law is broken and it is so far overdue. It's just sad to me that Congress is serving the American public and students and teachers so poorly.
Why do you think the odds are down with his stepping aside?
I think for this to pass, you need a strong bipartisan bill. And I think it's harder for whoever succeeds him to get to a bipartisan place. I hope I'm wrong. I'm not politically astute. Folks in this room are a lot smarter than I. But to get to a good bill that the president can support, it has to be a bipartisan bill that stays strong on accountability and helps us turn around underperforming schools. And I think it's difficult for the next leader. Again, I really, really, really hope and pray I'm wrong, but I think it's difficult for the next leader to work in a bipartisan way, given the pressure from the extreme right.
I'm assuming you don't want to stick around to be education secretary for the next president, but tell me if I'm wrong.
Now, my home's Chicago.
Okay. So what should the priority be? We've only got a minute left for the next secretary of education, the next president in education.
Well, I'm trying to start a conversation. Again, we have about 24 folks running for president, so lots of people who would love that job. Just a couple questions I wish folks in the media and all of us as voters would ask them. First, what are you doing to increase access to high-quality early childhood education? That's the best investment we can make. And again, relative to other nations, we have a dismal record. We're like 25th to 30th. It makes no sense whatsoever. So what's your commitment there? Secondly, what's your commitment to raise high school graduation rates, reduce dropout rates, make sure those high school graduates are truly college ready? And ultimately, what's your goal in terms of college completion rates? And if we just ask those 4 or 5 simple questions, what are your goals for each of these? And what's your strategy? What resources, political, financial, are you willing to put behind that? Everything else is just noise. Everything else is small ball. And we give political leaders a pass because we don't ask the simple questions that really give kids a chance in life. That's the conversation I'd like to see. Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. Who's willing to be the education leader? Not the photo op person, not the kissing baby person, but the person who actually increases educational opportunity, particularly for the most disadvantaged in our nation.
As I thank you to say goodbye, are you talking to any of these candidates? Are they coming to you for advice?
We have good relationships with many, not with all. And again, it's not about us at all. It's just really how do we help lead the world in educational attainment? That should be, again, there should be nothing political, nothing partisan about that.
Secretary Arne Duncan, thank you very much.